Good evening, football fans, DFS fans, football DFS fans. Welcome back to the Touchdowns for Dough show. Jack, week one in the books. Thoughts, feelings, opinions? Hit me with them.
Yeah, it was good to have NFL back. It was a bit of a weird week. I already mentioned to you before we come on air tonight, I didn't particularly enjoy week one at all. I thought the standard of football all around was pretty poor, outside of the Chargers and the Dolphins game. But you can say the football in that game was poor because both defenses were absolutely horrible in that game. It just started with them 6 p.m. games. Really, I didn't really enjoy the games, and that was. I mean, they're all quite low scoring. There's a lot of. I just sometimes these coordinators, to me anyway. I've never been a coordinator or anything, but they just seem to overcomplicate things, like by bringing in. I was watching a bit of the Browns game quite heavily, the Browns and the Bengals game, so quite a lot of that stacked up in DFS, and the Browns brought in Ford, and I just didn't understand it. And then he like coughed up the ball, he fumbled the ball, and I was just like, well, that's what you get. Like when you've got like an all-star running back, just use your all-star running back. I don't get it. But there was loads of it this week, like loads of these like backup running backs scoring touchdowns. Your Rams were doing it with Williams. He scored two, didn't he? I know Akers got one as well in the end, didn't he as well? But there was loads of that. I just didn't particularly enjoy week one at all. I just thought the standard of football was very poor, and then my Giants got absolutely steamrolled by the Cowboys, which was that was kind of the icing on the cake. And then I like Aaron Rodgers as a quarterback. I think he's like one of the best quarterbacks ever, and I enjoy watching him play. And 3 snaps into the game, he's done for the season. It's just a weird week, just a really weird week. A lot of people might put that down to me having a bad DFS week. I played the tickets, so I didn't really lose anything as such. I didn't enjoy the week at all.
Yeah, week one's always a strange week, I think, because for me, we went into week one with our strategy, and week one wasn't a fantastic week from a DFS perspective for me, but I'm not really looking to change anything going into week two, because week one, even week two for that matter, in the NFL, I always think two of the hardest weeks of the season to predict anything that's going to happen. And like you said, backups and timeshare running backs end up hawking touchdowns. You could have a running back basically drive the field and then gets to the red zone and doesn't see a touch of the ball in week one. And, for some teams, that'll carry on through the season. But then there's others where you'll expect to see the lead back in those situations more often than not. And I think week one as a whole, like the way that I approached my Millie build and anything where it was like single entry contests and stuff like that, I wouldn't necessarily change anything that I did there, even though it wasn't a particularly profitable week. The way that I built and constructed those lineups, I'm not going to change anything in week two about that. Like, it's an anomaly for week one, for example. T. Higgins, like, I didn't have any T. Higgins in my lineups, but no catches, no points. Like, you would not have predicted that in week one for T. Higgins. Absolutely not. And I know the Browns are decent, but that just shows how varied and unpredictable week one can be. The Rams game, I watched the Rams and Seahawks game as it happened live. And if you'd have said, Nick, who's going to see the most targets in this game, who's going to be the most productive Rams receiver, I'd have said Van Jefferson. I wouldn't have put two other wide receivers and a tight end ahead of him. And I certainly wouldn't have put Kyron Williams as the lead back for the Rams either. So it's just week one is an insane week. It is every year, I think.
The rookie wide receiver for the Rams, what's his name? Puka, is it? Is that his name? I'm just going to call him Puka.
Yeah.
He was getting a lot of steam on a lot of stuff that I was listening to, and he was min price on DK. I unfortunately didn't get there. I obviously listened to the start. I was like, yeah, I get it. But I was a bit like you. I actually thought Higbee was going to be the dominant one, and he was fine. Higbee was fine anyway, fine play. But it was kind of one of them things that I wanted to wait and see on it. Maybe I've missed my chance because he looked like Cooper Cup light at times in that game. And I'm quite happy that I had that bet at the start of the season. I know you thought I was a little bit mad for putting it on, but I had a bet on the Rams at 10-1 to win the division. I just see the Rams very much like the 49ers. I thought the Seahawks would come back to the pack. I think Geno will regress back to Geno. And I think the Cardinals are as bad as they are advertised, really, even though they were the highest scoring defense this week. We'll get into that in a minute. But I very much liken the Rams to the 49ers, whereas they're both probably one or two injuries away from being absolutely done for the season. There's players on both of them teams that you can't really afford to lose. And for the Rams, it's probably Stafford and Donald. And for the 49ers, it's probably Christian McCaffrey and probably Purdy, the way he played, or Bosa or someone like that. But, they can't really, both teams can't afford to lose a couple of pieces. So I was quite happy with the start. We'll see this week. The Rams play the 49ers, so we'll see this week how the bet keeps going. But I'm quite happy with the start. And yeah, I thought the Rams, McVay stuck around for a bit, so I thought they would be better than people were going to give them credit for.
Yeah, I think they'll be brought back down to earth a little bit this week against the Niners. But I don't know. Maybe after that week one, maybe it won't be as big a runaway as I'm thinking, or as people are making out throughout this week. Interestingly, though, Nakua, Mark would have loved that as a leverage play, I'm sure, because the Seahawks receivers were quite highly owned. Metcalf, Lockett, and I think Walker and Cam Akers were probably fairly well owned out of that game as well. Tutu Atwell and Van Jefferson both had higher ownership than Nakua. So he was a good leverage play off his own receivers. Never mind if you were leveraging off the Seahawks side as well. So I'm sure Mark would have loved that play. But Nakua at 3,000 lands in the perfect lineup for last week. So, I mean, what do we know about DFS?
No, I'm very much the same as you, though, in regards to DFS from last week. As much as I didn't enjoy the football, it was nice to be able to play NFL DFS again. And, I did okay on the Sunday night showdown with the Giants and the Cowboys. Thankfully, I went with Pollard in the captain spot, and I had a lot of. I've written it in our newsletter. I've been doing these quick hit newsletters. They're very quick and short. I just put a captain in there, what I'm doing on the slate. I said I was going to play Pollard in the captain, and I'm bringing the Cowboys defense back with him in every build, and it worked out quite nicely. So yeah, the Sunday slate sort of saved me, but yeah, it's nice to have DFS back. I won't be changing much within my process going forward and things like that. What we spoke about last week, I'm pretty sure that it'll come back at some point after these first couple of weeks. Like you say, these teams are just sort of they're finding themselves in these couple of weeks, these first few weeks here.
Yeah. And I think for me, I mean, we'll come on to the winning Millie lineup in a sec, Jack, because we've said that going forward, what we'll do every week is we'll do a little bit of a section where we review that lineup, see if there's any kind of trends that we can resonate with, anything where we can learn something, or where we can just say, you know what, that guy got lucky last week. And there's always going to be that element of luck when you are playing DFS or whether you're gambling, whatever it might be. But when I look at that Millie lineup, which we'll discuss more in a sec, when I look at that and how I built my lineup this week, I had the right kind of ideas, but just the wrong kind of the wrong stack, basically, just the wrong game. Well, I said wrong stack, right stacking in terms of actual construction. But I just like that Miami and LA game it seemed like everyone was playing players from that game. And there was just something in my head that thought, well, do you know what? If that's going to be the highly owned game, do I want a little bit from that game? Yes. Am I going to stack it? No, I'm going to go elsewhere and see if I can maybe get a little bit different and target some of the lower ownership, which is exactly what I did. But when you've got then a slate breaker like Tyreek Hill, who puts up nearly 50 points, and you stack him with Tua, who ends up landing in the perfect lineup as a quarterback with 32.14. I mean, if you've got that as your stack and that's in your Millie lineup, you're off to quite a good start, really, which is exactly what the winner had this week.
Yeah, no, it was. I had quite a lot of Herbert stacks myself. Again, something I wrote about in the newsletter. I done 3 stacks that I played. I had quite a lot of Millie tickets last week that completely got nuked into the sun, but it is what it is, you know. Again, I had a lot of the Herbert stack, but you know what I was doing last week in the Millie Maker? It was them big game onslaught stacks. It was the QB, a wide receiver, a tight end, and 2 bringbacks on the other side. It was the big old stack like that. I had a lot of Tyreek, loads of Tyreek. I had. I was mentioning to you before, wasn't I? Before we come on, that I think what you want to do in them scenarios is, I know that game. Say you go into this week, you go, I don't know, you pick a game this week. Let's say the Seahawks and the Lions. You go, I know that game's going to be chalk. Right, so what side is generating the chalk of it, the more chalk, so to speak? So let's say it's everyone's flocking to the Geno side with the Lockett and Metcalf bringbacks. Okay, so maybe if I play Goff and bring St. Brown, I don't know, David Montgomery back with him, and then let's say I play Metcalf and I don't know. Because that's the unique thing about this Millie build this week. He played 2 running backs in the same game. So that made it so unique. So let's say you brought it back with Metcalf and Ken Walker, for example. I personally wouldn't do that. I don't think that's going to work a lot of the time. Mark would love it because it's the most unique thing you could probably do in a build like that. But let's say, you know, that's kind of what we need to do, I think, more in these situations, like, because I see these games, everyone's flocking to that game. I'm getting really put off by it. I don't want to get involved in it. If I can find another game that's going to go off, I've got so much leverage to the field. But really, I could just go to that game and get leverage on the other side of it.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a completely viable option, that. And do you know what? Last week when I was building lineups, I was looking and I was thinking, not to do a 40-minute show all about the Rams here, but I was looking at that game and I was thinking it's completely viable to play Cam Akers and Kenneth Walker week 1 in the same lineup. Like, both teams could have just absolutely pounded that ball into the ground. Last season, that worked quite a bit if you were playing Lions against anyone. Like, if you were playing Lions against, I mean, I don't know. I think Lions and Seahawks was a high scorer last year. I feel like they played each other last year, and I feel like
they
it's a
did.
high
They did.
scorer.
Yeah, the person I know won the Millie Maker with that stack.
I think playing Walker and either Swift or Jamal Williams in that week, your lineup would have been so unique because so few people will pick running backs on both sides. Usually, like you've just said, you might have one as a bring back play if you're playing, say, quarterback with a running back, or you might have quarterback wide receiver stack, throw a tight end in there, then you might think, well, we'll throw in the running back from the other side. And, to have that as two from the same game, and if you're going to go big and stack elsewhere there, like you said, if you're going to throw in a Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown in there as well, I mean, your lineup's going to be so different and so unique. And it could have worked this past week, really, when you look at it. Like, it's only really Mostert that's let that down. Otherwise, like, completely viable again, where you could have said, well, Miami and the Chargers are going to be high-scoring game. Throw in Tua or Herbert. Throw in a Tyreek Hill or a Keenan Allen. And then, do you know what? I'm going to put Eckler in as well. And I think Mostert's going to see a lot of work. So I'm going to put Mostert in. And that is completely viable. And you've filled up 4 or 5 slots in your lineup there. Big old stack, like you said. Going to make your lineup a lot different. Ownership's going to be varied as well, because a lot of people are going to be going to one or the other. So, yeah, I think that's is certainly a way of approaching it. The Millie lineup then, Jack, from this past week, the one that won, took it all down. So we had a stack in that Miami game. We had Tua at quarterback, who was in the perfect lineup. Tyreek Hill in the flex. And we had a bring back of Austin Eckler, who was also in the perfect lineup. What's really helped this lineup out is he's put in Brandon Ayuk at receiver, who, again, perfect lineup. And some of his puntier plays, shall we call it, have just really paid off for him this week. Calvin Ridley, I think, was a good play anyway. I had a lot of Ridley with Trevor Lawrence, but then to throw in Kendrick Bourne, who gets 24 points, to throw in Hayden Hurst, who gets 15 points, and throws his quarterback's first touchdown pass into the crowd. Absolute maniac. And he gets 11 off the chalk defense, the Commanders as well. I mean, he's had some luck there. I think some of that construction is kind of along the lines that we were on, but he's certainly fallen lucky as well, because, if Kendrick Bourne doesn't have as big a game as he's expecting there, or if Hayden Hurst is a tight end, we know it's a variable position. If he catches 2 passes for 20 yards, he's not winning the Millie. He'll be high up. He would be high up, but
if you go back to the tight end position there with Hayden Hurst, if you think about it, it's actually a very, very good play, because the Panthers themselves, obviously, Thielen wasn't 100%. Chark was ruled out, wasn't he? So he didn't play in the game. So they were limited at wide receiver. It's a rookie quarterback. We know what rookie quarterbacks do. They just look for a safety valve, which is generally the tight end. Hayden Hurst is a pretty good pass catcher as it is. And what I liked about the Hurst play is it was really good leverage off chalk Isaiah Likely, which was a really bad play. If you go back to it now, you think the Ravens were fully healthy at wide receiver. They had all their running backs. Obviously, Dobbins started the game and got injured during the game. So the target, like, he was going to be limited compared to Hayden Hurst. He was going to be really limited on targets. So I really like the Hayden Hurst play. I think it's a very, very savvy play there. Something that people should monitor going forward. Just the state of these teams, and if there's injuries like that, where there's a limited wide receiver core, or it's just a load of young guys in the wide receiver core, and you've got a veteran tight end there in Hayden Hurst, for example, maybe you should be playing him in DFS over one of these. Isaiah Likely is probably like the 5th option on these bloody team. So I really do like the Hayden Hurst play. The stack, he's spot on. He's done what we mentioned a minute ago about playing the other side of the chalk, which I like. The 2 running backs is just, I mean, from the same game. That makes you so unique. Like, it's just no one does that. No one plays DFS like that. That will make you so unique in itself. He obviously got a bit lucky with the Washington D. It was fine. It got 11 points. It was chalk. It got 11 points in that game. shout out to my little call on the Cardinals D, because I did call that in our little WhatsApp group. I said just leverage to the Cardinals D, play that over the Commanders, and if that pays off, and it did, they scored more points than the Commanders D. So yeah, there's pieces in there. I think the Ayuk plays. I wouldn't say lucky, because there's a lot of steam coming out of the 49ers like this offseason saying about Ayuk that Shanahan was wanted to get him more involved this year, etc., etc. Going up against a very good defense in the Steelers as well. So, you know, like you say, Nick, you need a little bit of luck to win these things anyway. So I don't hate the play. You know, Ayuk's probably, I see Ayuk as one of them like high upside wide receiver plays where he just, you know, he can nuke a slate like that, but then for the next 4 weeks, he probably won't do anything. So that's kind of how I see Ayuk. I like Bourne. I had Bourne in a lot of my teams as well. He was very cheap. I think he's like 3,400 or something like that. And again, another situation. They had no wide receivers. They only had one of their tight ends. Gesicki was out injured. You know, so he was going to see a lot of targets himself. Bourne. So yeah, I like the build. Everything about it, I like. I wouldn't get. I just wouldn't be able to get to play the two running backs in the same game scenario. My head would probably say no, you're not doing that. And I don't think that works very often, personally, from what I've seen in DFS. But I like a lot of key aspects of this build. The tight end play is probably my favourite play.
Yeah, I like the tight end play, and it makes a lot of sense what you said there. You know, Chark was out, Thielen was banged up, new running backs. New running back, should I say, Miles Sanders. New quarterback, like you said, safety blanket. Normally, always the tight end, little dump off passes. So I do really like that play, especially over some of the other tight ends that were. I think Hayden Hurst's ownership was about 3 or 4%. So straight away you get a player like that in, and you only need a couple of them in your lineup, and your ownership is going to be around probably what it needs to be if you're going to pick maybe 2 or 3 highly owned guys, and then if you've got a couple spread in there as well that are under 5% ownership, and the rest somewhere between 5 and 15%, you'll be exactly where you need to be there, which is where this lineup was. I think it was about 131 or 132% total ownership. Nice range to be in. The Ayuk play, he's braver than me there, really, because I looked at that game and I thought everyone's kind of touting San Francisco for the win here. I felt they were going to win. I felt it was going to be a lot more competitive than it was on the road to Pittsburgh. First game of the season. Brock Purdy coming back from that injury. And that offense as well, like you said, he's had a smash game there. But could I play Brandon Ayuk with confidence this week? Probably not, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking on any given week, Deebo Samuel could go off. George Kittle could go off. Christian McCaffrey could hog most of the share because the Niners could get out to a really big lead and they could just pound the rock. And, you know, heaven knows Christian McCaffrey's a good receiving back anyway. So he's going to hawk some of the targets. And then you just get random people popping up like Kyle Juszczyk and whoever else the Niners are slotted in there at receiver, who are unknown players and just pop up and make wonder plays from nowhere. So he's a braver person than I am putting Ayuk in his lineup week one. One to monitor going forward, but as I said, I probably wouldn't be confident throwing him in week two. Just from what we've seen in week one, like I've no doubt he'll have a great season, but small sample size and big peak of a week. But you'll also get them weeks where he'll be in single figures. The Ridley play I loved. That was just, we've seen Calvin Ridley. Yes, he's had a year out, but all the reports in the offseason were nothing but positive, good connection with Trevor Lawrence. And I think his ownership was reasonably high as well, Ridley, but I didn't even care for that. I was just putting him in. I didn't really think much of the Colts. Kendrick Bourne is one that I completely swung and missed on. Nowhere near really my radar last week. But thinking about it again, that's of the slate here. I like the Hayden Hurst play, but that's probably my favourite play of his. Putting in a Kendrick Bourne who, like Juju Smith-Schuster goes into that offense. Not the Juju of old that we used to have in Pittsburgh 3 or 4 years ago. Kendrick Bourne, I think he's coming up to contract year as well. So, probably trying to make an impression. Or he's just signed a big contract, one or the other. I think he has just signed a big contract. So New England obviously think a lot of him. Always seems to pop up and make them big catches, more accustomed to the offense. And I think, again, a lot of people were expecting Philly to run away with that. But on the road at New England, week 1, against any Bill Belichick defense is always going to be a toughie. It was a close game. They actually had chances to potentially win it near the end as well.
Yeah.
I really like that play, and it wasn't close to being on my radar, but yeah, I mean, that lineup in itself, Jack, like I said at the start of the show, and like you said, I see how that lineup was constructed. I constructed lineups very similar, but with some different players that didn't hit in week 1. That doesn't mean they're not going to hit in week 2. So I'm not going to change anything at all about what I did this past week. How that lineup is built, if anything, encourages and gives me hope that what I did in week 1 was right in terms of lineup construction. Like his stack, his bring back, how he looked and targeted ownership in his lineup is exactly what I did in week 1. It's just some of the players that he's gone with, the likes of Hurst and Bourne. Yes, Walker didn't pan out. I had Aaron Jones in my lineups. He did pan out, was in the perfect lineup. But I was also surprised to see how high Aaron Jones's ownership ended up being, because I feel like no one was talking about Aaron Jones going into week 1. So
I think that might have been because that was a later game. So I think a lot of people might have done a late swap onto that game. The weather was bad. I think it was bad around most of America, to be honest. Most of the open stadiums, there was a lot of rain about and things like that. So I think a lot of people might have done a late swap onto Aaron Jones. I did in a couple of my lineups that were sort of hanging in the cash. I was like, oh, I'm going to late swap onto Aaron Jones, and like you say, end up being chalk. It's fine because he still got there and he was fine, But yeah, he did become sort of the late swap chalk, I suppose.
Yeah, but nothing that I've seen there from week 1 where I could take it away and say, you know what, yeah, that's what I learned week 1. If anything, I would say I probably missed a bit on the Hayden Hurst play. That was a really good play looking back. And I think I went, I had a bit of Juwan Johnson in on my lineups. Yeah. And I didn't go with Isaiah Likely. I didn't like that play either, but the Hayden Hurst play was quite sensible. And looking back on it with his ownership as well, that was a bit of a miss. But other than that, for me, Jack, nothing that I'm really taking away from that.
Even again with the Johnson play, if you look at it, you've got 2 very healthy wide receivers. I mean, they were using 3 wide receiver sets a lot of the time, the Saints, and Derek, you've got a quarterback who just, I don't know with him, he just loves to sling it down. Every time that game come on the red zone, it was him slinging it down the field, which is what he kind of likes to do. So yeah, I mean, I love the Hurst play. I think it makes so much sense. That's probably a lesson I've learned, that you need to. I did have Hurst in one lineup, but I need to learn my mind and myself to look at these teams, what they're doing, what injuries they've got, and then see where the targets are going to go, because it just makes so much sense. He was he was the favourite. If you look at it back now, he was the favourite to get all the targets in that game. I know Mingo had a good game as well, but it was you banged up Phelan, no Chark, a load of rookies as well, wide receiver. Yeah, he was going to be the number 1 target if you look back at it now, and it makes so much sense.
Yeah,
I do think he lucked out with Ayuk, though. I don't. It's a good play because the rest of his lineup's pretty solid there. Like, those guys are going to score for the most part within that team. that he's built there. So the upside that Ayuk can bring is a good play. I just think he's lucked out this week. I I couldn't go back, but fair play to him. It was a single bullet that he had in the milli maker, and he's took it down. So again, I've done it. You've done it, Nick. That says it to people that you can win big money with a single bullet. And we always get that. We always get that narrative of people whining. Oh, people who've got 150 lineups in here. Yeah, those people have got 150 lineups, but they're also using optimizers, which makes you unique because you're hand building your single lineup, and you can get completely different to what their optimizer is going to do, because their optimizer is going to tell them to. Their optimizer is going to print out something saying this is what you should do. Whereas your hand build would be like, right, well, I can do this, I can do that, and it's going to be completely unique most of the time.
Yeah. I feel like we'll move on to Showdown now, Jack, but I feel like there was an awful lot of victory lapping going on the socials in week 1. And
yeah,
I'm not here for it. I know you're not here for it. I like seeing people doing well. I like seeing people winning. It brings me nothing but joy when people that we know actually win, and we got a lot of compliments and praise for the show last week. But I also saw last week a massive variance in some of the quality and quantity of content that was released, and I know that Mark was another one on in our little group chat on this as well. But like, that lineup showed you that it's not enough to just look at a quarterback and a wide receiver stack and say, like, this is the one. Like, put in a quarterback and a wide receiver stack out there and kind of being like, do you know what, this is what you need to build your lineups around, just isn't enough. Like, and when I'm not saying for people to go out there and show everyone what lineup you're going to put in and how exactly you're going to build it and the players that you're going to pick and all stuff like that, because
you shouldn't actually do that. You'll get banned from DraftKings if you do that.
Well, exactly. And we don't do that either. But like, it's not for me. If you're new to this game and you're absorbing this content, you've just got to be mindful that just stacking a quarterback and a wide receiver from the same team, or even two, even if they do well, it is not an automatic given that you're cashing. Like, the rest of your lineup could be absolutely pap, or it could be great, like the Millie Maker winners lineup was.
I think people just get excited, don't they? We get it for golf, and so we get people messaging us on, I don't know, like the afternoon on day one of golf, and it drives me up the wall. It's like there's like 4 other rounds to do yet. You've got half the field still in bed. It drives me up the wall, stuff like that. But yeah, people just get excited with it. It's week 1. People have got excited, and yeah, we'll move on. It's week 2. Hopefully, these teams have found something.
Indeed. Showdown, Jack. I played Thursday. I also played Monday. Anything from you from Showdown this week? Any lessons learned? Anything you might do differently?
No, I mean, if you've read the newsletters that I've put out for quick hits for the Showdown, they've been pretty much spot on. I played Patrick Mahomes on Thursday in a lot of my builds, which was fine. I made a little bit of profit on Thursday. It wasn't a lot; it was about $10, but still, profit's profit. We take it. Sunday was the best. The Sunday night showdown, the Giants and the Cowboys. I've already mentioned what I've done. The Pollard, and this is why you should sign up to the newsletter, because I literally will break down what I'm going to do in the slate. That's my own. That's what I'm going to do. It doesn't always work, but I had some good calls this week within a few things that I put in the newsletter. And then last night, Monday night. Sorry, Monday night. Oh God, I forgot what day of the week it is. Monday Night Football. Again, it was fine. I had a small loss on Monday Night Football, but that was because the Jets done something that I didn't think they were going to do. Right, so I played Dalvin Cook in the captain spot, and then I just made a rule. I was just going to be like, right, I'm bringing the Jets D back with Dalvin. I just like that. I like that correlation between the two. I just like something I like to do. Because I thought they were going to run Dalvin into the ground to start the season off. It turns out that Breece Hall just come back and was electric. So yeah, it was a small loss on Monday night. Would I change anything? No, not really. I was quite happy with the way I approached every slate for Showdown this week. So no, just the normal rules for me. Don't be scared to leave money on the table in Showdown. I think that's a lot of people. I done it on so many of the slates this weekend on the Showdown slate. Sorry, I left like $3,000 on the table, and that would scare people. People were like, "Oh, maybe I could take this person out, and I can get up to this person." If you've got a lean on something, and you just because that player's 3,000 cheaper than the other player, just stay with your lean. Don't be just do not be scared to leave money on the table in Showdown. Your lineups need upside in Showdown. We're just talking about the Brandon Ayuk play there with the high upside. So I personally wouldn't, unless it's a real like crapshoot game, I would not be playing two defenses and two kickers, like taking up 4 of my 6 roster spots. Because it just limits your upside. It will make you quite unique, but it will limit your upside like massively. So that's something that I try to get away from. Understand usage and snap expectations. We've just talked about all that, about injuries and things like that. Just understand how these guys are going to be used, like the Hayden Hurst play that we just spoke about for the main slate. Embrace negative correlation. A lot of people. I can't remember. It was the Jet slate playing. If you played Josh Allen, it was the Chiefs slate. Sorry, if you played Patrick Mahomes in the captain spot, which was fine, he was the optimal captain. But in the Millie lineup for that Showdown slate, they brought back the Detroit defense against him. So that's where I'm getting at with negative correlation. Don't be scared to do that in Showdown. That will help you massively. There's just a few tips. There's more in the newsletter, like again, the quick tips and things like that in the newsletter I put out. But it's my favourite form of DFS, as I mentioned last week. It's where I've had my biggest success anyway. But there's nothing really for me to learn from this first week in regards to Showdown. I'm still going to play it how I want to play it. I get a lean on something, and then that's it. I go with that lean, and that's it, really, for me.
Yeah. I said to you last week when I was going to play when I played the Thursday game, I said on the show last week that what I've fallen foul of in the past on Showdown is getting too cute and trying to predict too much what's going to happen in the game.
Yeah.
And it's meant that I've excluded certain players because of that. And what I did different this week was in both games, I had in my captain slot. I think I had Pacheco on the Thursday, and then on Monday I had Garrett Wilson. It could have quite easily been Diggs, but I went with Wilson. Why I did that? Don't really know. I fancied that game to be reasonable scoring, competitive enough. And the volume on the Jets was always going to go to Wilson. The volume on the Bills was always going to be Diggs. So I had both in the lineup. I didn't play Aaron Rodgers. So I was banking on Wilson having a good game, but I didn't really care about what kind of game Aaron Rodgers had, and instead put Josh Allen in.
And I mean, that's not called negative correlation, but that's kind of down the same lines. If Garrett Wilson's going to get there, you would have thought Aaron Rodgers has got to do the damage as well.
Yeah, but the play there, I guess, was, I mean, there was certainly damage done to Aaron Rodgers, unfortunately, but it wasn't the kind of damage that will take down a showdown slate. But my thought process was, Bills' tough defense. All the pressure would have been on Aaron Rodgers in that game, and though he's accustomed to that kind of pressure, I've always found he's a bit of I think he sometimes falters in the bright lights, Aaron Rodgers. He's a fantastic quarterback, but I've seen a few times he's just not come up in the crunch. Now it's week one. I know it's not the same kind of circumstances as like an NFC championship game or playoffs, but I wasn't banking on him doing well. I didn't really care if Aaron Rodgers had the kind of game where he might have had, like one touchdown, one turnover, 250 yards, as long as 100 of those went to Wilson and he reined in, 5 or 6 catches. I was probably happy enough with that. Now he did get a score, which was even better, but I went with Wilson. Josh Allen, I threw in there. I put Diggs in there. I, like you, thought that Dalvin Cook would see the majority share of carries. That was what all the reports were saying. So I threw in Cook. Threw in Tyler Bass because it was either that or Greg Zuerlein. And this was a bit of a coin toss. I fancied the Bills to potentially come out on top. So I thought Tyler Bass maybe will have more attempts than Zuerlein. He's a reasonably good enough kicker anyway. I think he actually did outscore Zuerlein just, and I've seen Zuerlein miss badly. So there was that, and then Hurty was the other one I threw in. So I just went really cheap there, $200. Scored a 4.3. So in terms of his value,
you take that. Yeah, you take that.
Absolutely, for a $200 player. What that allowed me to do, and there was still money on the table, but there wasn't the kind of money where I'd have said like I'd rather have I don't know, I'd rather have a Dawson Knox, for example, over a Tyler Bass. Like I felt more comfortable with the scoring that I might have got from a Tyler Bass because it only takes a couple of field goals, a couple of extra point conversions.
Yeah.
Dawson Knox, if you're playing him, he's not a high volume tight end, so you pretty much need a score out of him. So yeah, and that lineup on Monday, I literally did one lineup in a $1 satellite and came out with a little Millie ticket. So I'll be back in the Millie lineup again, in the Millie slate, shall I say, this Sunday. But for me, I think my main takeaway, Jack, week one showdown was just like I said last week, don't get too cute. Try and think of a game outcome, and then just build whatever kind of feels right around that outcome without trying to predict too much about what will happen within that game to get to that outcome. So was trying to build the lineups. I think I had I don't know if it was a 3-3 stack in the Chiefs and Lions game because I felt that would be fairly competitive as well. I put the message on our group chat saying, is there a world where the Lions potentially turn up and actually beat?
You did.
Yeah. Because, Chris Jones isn't playing and they don't get as much pressure on quarterbacks. And then, that's where Jared Goff usually falters, but he might not have that issue. And, that's what happened. And I'm not kind of victory lapping the prediction there because it was more of a theoretical, this could happen. And that's kind of where I'm going to go with my showdown lineup. So I had a bit of a balance there, and I actually had it more balanced than it was. In the end, it might have been a 4-2 stack in the Chiefs' favour, but I think initially it was 3-3. The Monday night one was a complete 3-3 stack.
Yeah.
4-2 in favour of the Bills. But again, it could have easily been 3-3 had I gone with Zuerlein as the kicker, for example. But I think for me, it was just as I was building those lineups, I was thinking less of, Dalvin Cook could just run it into the ground. So do you know what? I'm going to completely ignore the Jets receivers because I think it'll be a running kind of game in poor weather. Didn't think of it like that. I just thought, do you know what? This could be reasonable scoring. I think Wilson's probably going to get targets. I think Diggs is going to get targets, despite them both having difficult defensive matchups, lineup-proof kind of players like we spoke about. So plug them in. And we're back in the Millie again this week.
Lovely. It's great to see. I will be in there with you as well, so don't worry about that. We'll go for it this weekend. Hopefully, these teams stop using backup running backs. I think that'd be great.
Well, we had looking at the perfect lineup, Jack. We had some of the right ideas. We were definitely along the right line. So nothing changing for me this week. Let's attack it exactly the same, and let's see where we are next weekend.
Yeah,
do you know what?
If definitely.
If we're in the same position, so be it. Let's keep going.
Yeah, just keep going. You'll get a good week. One week. No, it's fine. Don't. I'm not changing nothing going into this weekend. I'm quite comfortable where I am. I was very comfortable with what I've done through every slate this week, so I'm not changing just yet.
No. Nice. I think that wraps us up. I don't know if Mark's back with us again next week, Jack, is he?
He is. He's back from sunny Italy. So we'll have Mark back. He's the one who keeps us in line and all of that good stuff. So, yeah, ladies, Mark will be back for you next week. Sign up to the newsletter if you haven't. Head on over to Touchdowns for Dough. Like I mentioned, I covered every slate last week somehow, and somehow I've written a golf newsletter tonight as well. I was doing this podcast. Yeah. Non-stop.
The man that never sleeps.
Yeah.
Enjoy week 2. Best of luck, everyone, whatever you're playing, whether it's showdown, millie, just general contests, hundos, throw that in there. We will see you next Tuesday and the return of the great one, Mr. SMRF, Mark Ferguson. We look forward to it.
Master Yoda.
Same age. Same. Right, we'll catch you next Tuesday. Enjoy.
Yes.
See you.